Hello, boys and girls. I wanted to get on here and talk to you a bit about our tall tales. Last week, you were supposed to listen to Paul Bunyan, and then you were going to answer a couple of questions about Paul Bunyan, and most of you did that. Great job. But we're going to be listening to 4 tall tales in this second part of our unit. And to organize it, we're going to use a chart. So you're going to need this book, actually. It says Knowledge 1 through 6. You're going to need this book. Okay? And we're going to be opening up to page 13. Okay? So get this book out and open to page 13. Now, I've worked on this so that we can kind of go through this a little bit more quickly. But open to page 13, and it looks like this. It's got a big chart on it with amazing childhood, creations, inventions, amazing adventure, humor, and exaggerations. And then across the top, there is a list of 4 tall tale characters. And so Paul Bunyan is the first one. Okay, so we're going to fill in this first column together and talk about some of the things that make tall tales, and how what that looked like in our story, Paul Bunyan. So one of the things that tall tales often have is the characters have amazing childhoods, just something really different than the typical one. So we're going to fill this in for Paul Bunyan here, and the first thing we're going to talk about or fill in here is that his parents had to use a covered wagon for a cradle for him. A covered wagon's really big compared to a regular baby cradle. So the fact that he had to use a covered wagon for a cradle was pretty amazing. So again, anytime you need to pause, go ahead and pause this and fill in the chart as we go along. The next one is creations and inventions. So think back to the story Paul Bunyan. And what are some of the things that the story said he created or he invented? There are several things. But I went ahead and wrote down, and you can write this down too, and if you want to add to it, that's fine. But one of the things that they said he created were the Rocky Mountains. He created the Rocky Mountains, and also the Appalachian Mountains. But I wrote down Rocky Mountains. That's what we have right outside our city to the west. We have Rocky Mountains. So our story explained the Rocky Mountains that Paul Bunyan invented those. Another thing you see in tall tales are amazing adventures. Usually our characters in tall tales are involved in quite the story. Quite amazing things happen to them. So for Paul Bunyan, one of the amazing things that happened was that he straightened up a river with his big blue ox named Babe. So straightened up a river with Babe, the blue ox. Again, I'm going quickly, so if you want to pause it and then fill out your chart as we go, that's just fine. So that was pretty amazing. He straightened out a river with his ox. Now, tall tales often have a lot of humor in them, and so these take place often in the West, when the West was young and people were starting to settle out there. And so one of the things that was sort of humorous in Paul Bunyan's stories was the giant flapjacks, or the giant pancakes. And then finally, one of the things that makes a tall tale is the exaggerations. Everything's bigger and louder and taller and more amazing than anything else, any normal person, any normal story. So there's it full of exaggerations. So one of the exaggerations from that's in Paul Bunyan is just his height and his strength. Those things were exaggerated or made to be bigger than they really were. So if you want to add anything in here that, like the humor one, we might not all agree on what's humorous. Maybe you found something else funny in that story, Paul Bunyan, and you want to write that down. That's okay. So what we're going to do now is listen to the story about another tall tale character named Pecos Bill. Here it is, Pecos Bill. And let me get our story pulled up, and we're going to listen to that. And then after it's over, we're going to come back to this chart, and we're going to fill in the column for Pecos Bill. So as you're listening, keep in mind some things you might want to write down. I've got some stuff written already because I've listened to the story. But I think about amazing childhood. What things would you want to write for that? His creations and inventions, amazing adventures, anything humorous or funny in the story, and exaggerations.
Welcome to the next story in our Tall Tales unit. Today we are going to read Pecos Bill. Remember, tall tales are often stories that take place in the American frontier. The main character usually has an amazing or unbelievable childhood. This person usually goes on to do even more amazing things and have amazing adventures in his or her life. Tall tale characters perform amazing deeds. Tall tales often have a great deal of exaggeration. This often makes them humorous. The characters in a tall tale are always larger than life. Paul Bunyan traveled from the east coast of the United States, where most of the early settlers lived, crossing the Appalachian Mountains and traveled to the west coast. This is a picture of the Appalachian Mountains. Paul Bunyan traveled along the east coast from Maine down and created the Appalachian Mountains. Today's story is going to be about Pecos Bill. Pecos Bill was a cowboy. The cowboy is a man who works on a ranch or an area where cattle graze, and they take care of the cattle. Cowboys were common on the frontier because many people raised cattle for food, sold for their milk, or sold the cattle themselves to make money. This is a picture of Pecos Bill. Pause the video and describe what you see in the picture to someone nearby. Tall tale characters have amazing adventures, and this illustration hints at some of the adventures a cowboy like Pecos Bill may have. This is a photo of the Pecos River. This is located in West Texas. Texas is where our story of Pecos Bill begins. Listen carefully to the story of Pecos Bill to find out what amazing adventures he has in today's tall tale on the American frontier. The greatest cowboy that ever lived was the one they call Pecos Bill. Bill was born in East Texas and might have lived there forever, but one day his pa came running out of the house shouting to his ma, "Pack up everything we got, Ma. There's the neighbors moved in near about 50 miles away. It's a-getting too crowded around here." So Bill's folks loaded up the covered wagon with everything they owned and headed out west. It was a long, hard journey. The children were packed in the back of a wagon, all 18 of them. They were fussing and hollering, and they fought as the wagon bounced along. The children were so loud that Bill's mama said you couldn't hear the thunder under the noise. One day, the wagon hit a rock, and little Bill fell right out. With all the fussing and fighting, nobody noticed. The wagon just kept on going. So little Bill found himself sitting in the dirt along the banks of the Pecos River. That's how he got the name Pecos Bill. But that was later. Little Bill was not your average baby. He didn't cry. He just crawled along the dusty plain, keeping his eyes peeled for whatever came along. And the first thing that came along was a coyote. When the coyote saw this dirty, naked little creature crawling around on all fours, she thought he was a cute little animal, even if his ears were mighty small. Little Bill reached up and patted the coyote's head and said, "Nice doggy." The doggy, I mean coyote, liked Little Bill. She took him home and raised him with her pups. The coyote taught Bill to roam the prairies and howl at the moon. They taught him the secrets for hunting, how to leap like an antelope and how to run like the wind. They taught him how to chase lizards and to lie still as if he was almost invisible. The years went by, 18 of them to be exact, and Bill grew up mighty strong and healthy. One day, while he was out hunting along the Pecos River, when he saw the most unusual sight. It seemed to be a big animal with 4 legs, or was it 6? And why did it have one head in front and another on top? Well, it turned out to be a horse with a man riding on it, something Bill had never seen before. Bill scurried around the horse a few times, then slowly creeped forward and took a sniff in the man's boot. "Boy," said the man, "what are you doing scampering around down there in your birthday suit?" "Sniffing," said Bill. "I'm a coyote." "No, you ain't," said the man. "You're a man like me." "No," howled Bill. "Coyote." "What makes you think you're a coyote?" said the man. "I have fleas," said Bill. "So what?" said the man. "Men have lots of fleas in Texas here." But Bill was not persuaded. He was sure he was a coyote. "Here's the thing," said the man. "Coyotes have pointy ears and big bushy tails, and you don't." "Oh, yes, I do," cried Bill. He felt sure that he had a tail, just like all the other coyotes. He looked over his shoulder, but couldn't see one. He reached back to grab his tail, but he couldn't feel one. He backed up into the river and looked for his tail in the reflection, but it was not there. Bill was surprised. He thought for a moment. Then he decided the man must be right. If he didn't have a tail, he couldn't be a coyote. If he wasn't a coyote, he must be a man. Bill decided he'd say farewell to his 4-legged friends and try living as a man. He went to stay with the man who had just happened to be a cowboy. The man gave Bill some clothes to wear and a horse to ride. He also gave him the nickname Pecos Bill. At first, Bill had trouble living like a man. He couldn't stand the way his clothes scratched and pulling out his skin, or his boots, how they came between him and his bare feet and the good old dirt. He couldn't see the need for a knife and a fork when it was easy to use your finger to pick up your meat and to tear it with your teeth. Bill learned to act like a man, but he still had that spark of wildness in him. It would flash out from time to time. One day, he was out riding his horse when he was surprised by a mountain lion. Mountain lion scared Bill's horse away and chased right out at Bill. But Pecos Bill was too quick for that mountain lion. He dodged that big cat, then he hopped right onto his back. The mountain lion was not happy, no sir. He bucked and he snarled. He twisted around and bit Bill. Bill held on to the lion's neck with one hand. He had the other hand. He waved his cowboy hat in the air and shouted, "Yahoo!" The mountain lion did everything he could to shake Bill off, but it was no use. Finally, he gave in and let Bill ride him. Then Bill put a saddle on the lion and rode him like a horse. Bill had tamed that mountain lion. Another day, Pecos Bill was attacked by a giant rattlesnake. This particular rattlesnake was a mean old feller who thought that he was the king of the desert. He struck Bill's heel, but Pecos Bill was too quick for that rattlesnake. Pecos Bill grabbed that rattler by the neck and squeezed him hard. The snake wriggled and writhed in Bill's grip. "Say, Uncle, if you had enough," said Bill. "Grr, Uncle," said the snake, gurgling out the sounds the best he could. Bill relaxed his grip a bit and asked the rattler, "Who's the boss around here?" "I was," said the snake, "but now you are." "Well, then," said Pecos Bill, "how'd you like to work for me?" "Sure thing," said the rattler. The rattler just looked at Pecos Bill with admiration and purred like a kitten. Pecos Bill had squeezed all that meanness right out of that snake. Next, Pecos Bill rolled up that rattler into a coil and rode away on his mountain lion. On the way back to camp, he spotted a runaway cow. He grabbed the rattler and tied a loop at one end of him and made a lasso. Then he rode after the cow, swinging the lasso above his head. Then, when he was close enough, he tossed the looped end of the snake over the cow. Pecos Bill jumped off the mountain lion and pulled the lasso tight, stopping that runaway cow right in his tracks. Pecos Bill brought the cow back to his friend, the cowboy. After that, he taught all the cowboys at the ranch how to use a lasso to catch a runaway cow. He taught them other things, too. He taught them how to tame wild horses by riding them, just like he had done the mountain lion. Then he taught them how to sing cowboy songs around a campfire at night in a voice that sounded a lot like a lonesome coyote howling at the moon. Pecos Bill was famous for his riding skills. He once rode a wild Mustang called Backbreaker that no one else could ride. But that story pales in comparison to the time he rode something that no other man had ridden before, and I reckon no other man ever will again. A cyclone. That's right. Pecos Bill lassoed a cyclone with his rattlesnake lasso and jumped up on the rip-roaring back. That cyclone spun furiously, trying to throw Bill off. He went spinning this way and that way across the Arizona desert, trying to knock Bill off by rising up into the air and digging down into the ground. Pecos Bill didn't let go of that cyclone till it spun itself out of energy. And by that time, the two of them had carved out a deep canyon. You ever go to Arizona, you can still see that canyon today. It's called the Grand Canyon.
Okay, boys and girls, did you enjoy Pecos Bill? It was quite a tall tale, wasn't it? So we're going to go back to this chart right now, and we're going to think about these 5 topics in Pecos Bill and fill out our chart. So one of the things, first one is amazing childhood. So in the story Pecos Bill, I thought that it was pretty amazing that he grew up in a coyote pack. Most kids don't grow up in coyote packs. Now, if you thought something else was pretty amazing for his childhood, you can write that in there too. But if you want to write what I have, that's also okay. And again, if you need to pause, you can pause. How about his creations and inventions? There was a lot. As it said, he created a whole lot of things, but one thing I thought was interesting is he invented cattle roping. And cattle roping is quite important in the West, and so they had this character, Pecos Bill, who somehow came up with cattle roping. How about his amazing adventures? Pecos Bill had a lot of amazing adventures, but he squeezed the meanness out of a rattlesnake, and I made a mistake here. I started writing madness, and that was not what I was trying to say. So I had to write it in here. It's MEANNESS, meanness. So he squeezed the meanness out of a rattlesnake. That's a pretty amazing adventure. I think even just coming in encounter with the rattlesnake is pretty amazing sometimes, but the fact that he touched it and squeezed the meanness out of it, that was pretty amazing. Okay, now here, I want to see, I'm not going to give you this one, because the last time I gave you what I thought was funny in Paul Bunyan, I've said giant flapjacks. So I want you to think back to what you think is funny, and I want us to come back to this, okay? But in here, I want you to write down what part of Pecos Bill did you think was humorous or funny. So you write in there what you want, what you thought was funny. And then finally, think about exaggerations. Boy, there was a lot of exaggerations in Pecos Bill, but I thought one of the biggest ones was that he rode a cyclone. That seemed like quite the exaggeration. So, boys and girls, I want you to finish these two columns and make sure you have added what you found funny in Pecos Bill.